Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving right into one of the most absolutely incredible logistical and humanitarian feats of the entire 20th century. Picture this. It's the summer of 1948. Berlin, a city that had literally just survived the unimaginable devastation of the Second World War, suddenly finds itself thrust right into the center of a chilling new conflict. You've got a population just trying to rebuild their lives, right? And instead, they're looking down the barrel of a completely different kind of siege. The silence in Berlin was deafening. Think about that for a second. That silence was the terrifying reality of severed roads, halted railways, and completely blocked canals. The main arteries of the city were just cut, gone. Supplies were vanishing overnight. Fear was totally gripping the civilian population because, while they were facing a brutal winter with absolutely no heat and no food. But then, breaking that awful silence, came a sound from the horizon. It wasn't the rumble of tanks or the crack of artillery. No, it was the low, persistent, life-saving hum of aircraft engines.
So to really understand this crisis, we've got to look back to the rubble of 1945. Following the surrender of the Third Reich, Germany and Berlin itself were partitioned into occupation zones. Now, what was supposed to be a temporary administrative fix, that quickly became a permanent, deep fracture. As the Western Allies tried to rebuild a democratic Germany, the Soviet Union tightened its grip on the East. By the summer of 1948, diplomatic efforts completely fell apart. And then, boom, June 24, 1948. The Soviet Union officially closes all land and water access to West Berlin. Their goal was brutally straightforward: starve the Western presence right out of the capital.
2 million people. Over 2 million people. Just imagine your entire metropolitan city suddenly trapped behind a wall of political tension, completely 100% cut off from the outside world. Inside the blockaded sectors, the situation went south almost immediately. Coal for electricity rationed to just a few hours a day. Grocery store shelves went totally bare. We're talking about over 2 million civilians who were once again staring down the very real prospect of starvation and a slow, agonizing surrender as the Cold War claimed its very first major focal point.
But the American and British forces didn't back down. Instead, they launched what they called Operation Vittles. And let me tell you, the plan was as bold as it was totally logistically daunting. The idea? To supply an entire metropolitan population solely by air. Now, military experts and skeptics all around the world thought this was an absolute fool's errand. I mean, to feed 2 million people and provide the coal needed just to keep a city's infrastructure running, that required thousands of tons of cargo every single day. It required a level of precision and timing that had literally never been attempted in aviation history.
Yet despite those totally impossible odds, a literal bridge of planes actually took shape. It required this relentless three-step rhythm. Every few minutes, day and night, no breaks. A cargo plane would touch down at Tempelhof or Gatow Airfield. They'd rapidly offload their precious cargo. We're talking flour, sugar, massive tons of coal to fuel power plants, and critical medicine to ward off diseases. And then, they'd take off immediately to make room for the very next aircraft. It was just a completely relentless clockwork rhythm.
But you know, we really have to remember the human toll behind all this machine-like efficiency. The pilots truly became the heartbeat of the city. And they were flying straight through treacherous European winters. They navigated through thick fog and blinding snowstorms. Actually, the weather was so incredibly severe that civilian flights were frequently grounded. But these airlift pilots, they worked around the clock, fueled mostly by coffee and the heavy knowledge that if they stopped flying, Berlin would fall. And month by month, they somehow increased their tonnage until they were delivering more supplies by air than had ever arrived by train.
So we've talked about the incredible math and the logistics of this whole thing, right? The tonnage, the crazy schedules, the grueling weather. But how exactly did this massive, cold, calculated military operation become one of history's most profound symbols of hope? Well, it happened because amidst all those chaotic flight paths, a deeply human story was quietly emerging.
That deeply human story started with an American pilot named Gail Halvorson. Halvorson noticed this group of children gathered at the edge of the airfield, just watching these massive planes land. And it hit him. While the city was getting flour and coal, the absolute bare essentials for survival, these kids were completely missing out on the small, simple joys of childhood. So he decided to do something completely wonderfully absurd. As his intimidating, massive military cargo plane made its final approach to the runway, he began dropping treats, and he attached them to tiny handmade parachutes crafted out of handkerchiefs.
This one simple act of kindness sparked the famous Candy Bombers movement. It signaled to the people of Berlin, and especially the kids, that the outside world hadn't forgotten them.
Those tiny parachutes drifting down from the sky, they transformed the entire atmosphere of the airlift. They became an absolute icon of freedom that resonated across the globe, proving that compassion is honestly just as vital as coal when it comes to keeping a city alive.
The heroism was so immense that it caught the world's imagination almost instantly. You can see the stark contrast here, going from the harrowing, gritty reality of the 1948 blockade to a sweeping Hollywood narrative by 1950. A movie called The Big Lift starring Montgomery Clift was released. And what's super amazing about this is that it was filmed on location in a still scarred Berlin, using the actual people and real aircraft from the operation. It served as this incredible bridge for global audiences to witness the human connection formed between former enemies in the Allied forces.
All of that sheer determination finally culminated in May of 1949. Recognizing that their blockade had entirely failed to starve the city or break the will of the people, the Soviet Union finally threw in the towel. They conceded. They reopened the roads and railways to West Berlin. The airlift had officially, miraculously, succeeded.
This was a monumental victory achieved without firing a single shot. It proved, without a doubt, that international cooperation and sheer determination could overcome incredibly aggressive territorial pressure. But what's most inspiring here, at least to me, is that history, in this case, wasn't shaped by destructive battles. It was shaped by the quiet, tireless dedication of pilots, mechanics, cargo crews, and ordinary people who simply refused to let their neighbors perish. They carried freedom and hope into a world that was desperately searching for both.
The Berlin Airlift solidified geopolitical alliances and saved over 2 million lives through pure ingenuity and kindness. So it leaves us with this. If a city's survival could be secured not by artillery, but by the tools of compassion and logistics, what modern conflicts might be solved the exact same way? It's a pretty powerful question to consider, isn't it? Well, thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.